how are you training for this year's upcoming death hike?
Why are you smiling?
I heard, not just from Kyle, I heard a lot more stories this year as I spent some time with some of the people that participated in the death hike about this. And so I'm just picturing it and just eager for another year.
Okay, well, I think that everyone would be really disappointed if I didn't say, what stories did you hear?
I feel like I'm not supposed to share. I feel like I'm not supposed to share.
This is like Fight Club.
What? No, it's just funny stuff. Like, um, I don't know. People These people said it about themselves. I won't name names, but some people felt more proud of their accomplishment than other people. There was a snowstorm, blizzard, near-death experience for some. Not sure who did this, but someone decided to inReach one of the wives, which was not a good idea to say, "We don't know where your husband's at in the Grand Canyon." Are you gonna put this in there? Okay. Um, yeah, don't ever message the wife to say, "We don't know where your husband is in the Grand Canyon in a blizzard." People don't know about Vegas,
Who they do know.
do they? No, this might seem really cliche, and I don't know if this is gonna make it in this podcast or not, but people, when I tell friends and whatnot that you're doing death hikes, they're like, "Death hike? What is that?" And I kind of try to explain it, which you really can't do it justice for the experience that I know you and your friends all have. But um, I I don't know. I feel like this old mom saying this, but I really couldn't think of a better experience that you get to have. I have no interest whatsoever ever with a greater group of people. I mean, I was truly honored to get to spend time with a lot of the guys that do this death hike and their wives. And yeah, I would say probably honestly, one of the most blessed times of, I guess, since we've been married is getting to spend time with people that love what we love to do, or at least love what you love to do and care about you so much. So if you wanna write down in the comments, if that's how this works, more stories, I can share a little bit more.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, I mean, I'd echo that. It doesn't answer the question, but when we first started these, at least for me, I never really planned on it becoming what it is, but it's such a great group of guys that I just care so much about. So I don't know, it'd have to take something pretty big for me to miss one of these just because of them. I mean, that alone is worth going. So, how am I training for this year's upcoming death hike? Yeah, so I'll put the recap from last year's death hike in the show notes if you want to listen to that. Long story short, we were going for 100 miles in the Grand Canyon, basically nonstop. We got 50, got hit with a snowstorm, and ended up not doing the next 50. A lot of different reasons, but I think at the end of the day, we all packed up our gear, we got on the bus, we started driving back to Vegas to catch flights, and we all kind of felt like, yeah, I'm sore, but I'm not 50 miles sore. Yeah, I'm not dead. I could, if I think if any of us were honest, we could have easily gone back in. Could we have done another 50? That'd have been rough. We might have been in rough shape at the end of that. But long story short, I think we all felt like we wanted to give it another shot. So that's what we're doing this year. How am I training? So I'm not going to go into like the specifics because that previous podcast kind of goes into some of that. But I will say this, and I've heard a couple other guys in the group kind of echo this. As Grant and Sam have gotten older, and it's a lot harder to get away for big days of training, 8 and 9 hours of hiking and getting a lot of elevation in for something like this. So what I've seen over the years of getting ready for these or really big backpacking trips or backpacking hunts or whatever is I sort of envision it as this bell-shaped curve, and the bell-shaped curve being On one side of this, I have to do more than usual, or there's no way I'm going to be able to get through 2 days of this, right? So it's going to have to be more than what I typically do to try to stay in decent conditioning. Yet there is on the other side this idea of there's this optimal amount, right? And by all means, you've got to come as close to matching this big effort as possible in your training to prepare for it. And I've not found that to be necessarily the case. I've learned that even when pushing optimal volumes, it doesn't suck any less in the middle of it. I mean, it still just sucks. There's going to be a point where it is just 100% between your ears, and there is no amount of training that's going to get you to avoid that. There's no big days of training where you don't still feel that, right? And then on the flip side of that, when training for more of these optimal volumes, I've found I almost always end up hurting something, right? Like I almost always end up injured in some fashion, and or show up to the start of the trip or the hike or the death hike or the hunt or whatever, not feeling that great, right? And that's not really the way that you want to feel going into something like that. And so going back to the bell-shaped curve analogy, I've sort of struck this balance with myself and in my head of, all right, this needs to be a little bit more than what I typically do, but I don't have the time to necessarily dedicate to optimal value, and I don't know that there is. So I basically aim for something in the middle, which, like a lot of the terminology you often hear around this, is the minimum effective dose. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for what my minimum effective dose is, and then just going and going for it. I will say this, the really, really, really nice thing about having a training program written out that I can follow, and, like I just kind of follow one that I write for myself. But the really nice thing about having that is I have no motivation this year. Like we have so much going on, and I just have really low motivation to invest some of these because the volume's still a lot higher than what I usually do. However, if I just look at the training plan and I go and do what it is that I've written out for myself, then I know I'm reaping the benefit in spite of not feeling like it. So, you know, people that are in Valley to Peak will often say like, man, I just wish that I was as motivated as you always are. And I am here to say that I am not always that motivated, right? There are times for all of us, I think, where like you're not motivated, but fortunately, if you just have something written down that's, a plan, and you just go do it, you don't have to be motivated. You just show up, you do it, you reap the benefit, you know that you'll be ready for whatever that day is.
I'm excited for this one because this comes up pretty much every single week of my life in some form or fashion. I always come home and say, tell me one more time. Tell me again why this is okay. So thank you to whoever wrote this. The question is, or comment, you've responded on your Friday Q&A and social media that you're not worried about seed oils the way others seem to be in the nutrition space. Why is that? Are you worried about the omega-6 to omega-3 ratios?
Yeah, I have said that, and I'll still say that. I am not worried at all about seed oils for a couple of reasons, and I'm glad that the omega-3 to omega-6 ratio question was piggybacked on that, because a lot of why I'm not worried about it has to do with that. So number one, the reason I am not worried about it is because across the board, right, in every single piece of data that we see in observing people who take these, when you isolate seed oils by themselves, that means you study their effect, we only find improvement in health outcomes and lipid markers and other markers of inflammation even. Those go down. When you isolate someone taking some of these seed oils, they tend to go down. The second piece of that is when they don't, it's almost always associated with the vehicle in which a person is getting that seed oil, which is typically fried foods and packaged foods. One of the biggest things that we have an issue with is how good, how tasty, how delicious packaged and fried foods are, how convenient they are, how inexpensive they are, and how hard they are to stop eating, right? So we eat large quantities of these oils in in high frequency. And so it's an overexposure to those foods, which, yes, do happen to be fried in a seed oil, that creates a lot of the quote inflammatory responses and negative health outcomes that you see in people who do this. The reason I am not worried at all about the omega 6 to the omega 3 ratios is because most of these seed oils have a very low ratio. Two of the biggest ones that you're going to find that have a high ratio are going to be grapeseed oil and sunflower oil, which are predominantly used in fried foods. So again, like the bigger thing that needs to be said in here and included in this whole conversation and blasted all over social media is we don't need to eat less seed oils. We need to eat less fried and packaged foods in smaller quantities and in less frequency if we truly want to have if we want to put any sort of a dent in trying to alleviate a lot of the issues that people are chalking up to seed oils, because we don't find that at all. When we control calorie for calorie seed oils for some of these other foods, like I said, a lot of these markers improve. So no, I'm not worried about it.
Can you explain more about the omega-6 and omega-3? Do you want one to be higher, one to be lower?
Yeah. So omega 6s and omega 3s, the terminology and the naming behind that has to do with the chemical structure of the fat itself, right? What they tend to find is that omega 3s are really good. Too many omega 6s have a poor health outcome for the most part. Again, that's a much more complicated conversation than just saying that, but that's what people are going to understand. When you look at the studies that are causing, when you look at what's causing health problems and the studies that are associated with looking at that, they tend to find that ratio to be off, right? So an ideal ratio is going to be like 2-to-1 to potentially even as high as 4-to-1. Anything above that's going to be not particularly good, or you tend to find a lot of unhealthy outcomes whenever it is a lot higher than that. So yeah, you do want. I struggle to say this because there's just it's such a deeper topic than just this statement, but you want more omega 3s than you want omega 6s. If you get the ratio off too much, it's generally going to be because you're eating a lot of really, high fat fried and packaged foods. And that's generally going to be associated with poorer health outcomes. But if you look at like olive oil, for example, that ratio is extremely low. So to classify something like that as a seed oil and then put that in the bucket of this god-awful thing that's sending you to your grave, or that by removing seed oils you now are all of a sudden healthy, is very misleading and not even remotely close to actually true.
Are there the same effects of, let's just say, over-consuming fried food and packaged because they have, like, I don't wanna say over-consuming seed oils because that's not the issue, it's that the foods that they are in is the issue and how they're prepared is the issue. Let's say, because I have friends that are also way into this, that those same foods, so like fries and burgers and whatever else is so good and fried, what if that is used with a different oil? What then?
Well, you would drive the ratio down, right? But again, this is a much more complicated question. So let's say that what's popular right now is people are not using seed oils and they're starting to use beef tallow, right? So there's a couple of issues. I'll give you two scenarios. Beef tallow is extremely high in saturated fat, and regardless of what you hear, we still see a fairly strong correlation between a high consumption of saturated fat and cardiovascular risk. There was recently a guy in the news who was following a carnivore diet, lost a lot of weight, 6 to 8 pounds of cheese per day is what he was eating. He had cholesterol number of over 1,000 and started to develop. You could see cholesterol developing in his skin. So he got admitted in Tampa, right? So again, like that's an extreme scenario, but you can't say that because this whole class is bad, we're going to go to the other class and now that's totally safe. That's not true either. Okay, well, let's think of something more reasonable. We find an oil that has a low omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. Does that improve anything? And again, no, because the bigger conversation is we overconsume. It's the dose that makes the poison. Like we have said that forever. And even if you now improve the omega-3 to omega-6 ratio, people are still over-consuming calories. That's generally going to lead to someone being above a weight that's healthy for them. We know that there's a chronic state of inflammation whenever that scenario is taking place in anyone, regardless of the quality of the food that you eat or whether you buy it at Whole Foods or Winco. So you're still not going to be living this longer life just because there's a different ratio in the seed oils. The second biggest problem that I've got with particularly restaurant foods that are frying stuff is we know that as oil is heated and cooled, it continues to break down, and that also causes a lot of health problems, right? So even if you find this magical oil that's good for you, the constant heating and cooling of that, and the breakdown of those oils are also tied to health issues. That's again what is so interesting about this conversation of us using natural food dyes and Fruit Loops. It's like, do we think that that is now all of a sudden going to make Fruit Loops this health food? Of course not. It's such a bigger conversation. It's hard to grasp. Food and habits and choice in food and habits and weight is a complicated problem that is never going to be fixed by us sitting here and isolating single ingredients without addressing habits, right? We'll never be able to. And right now, the villain happens to be seed oils. Years ago, it was high fructose corn syrup. And turns out, oh, well, shoot, we took that out and started making Pepsi with normal sugar, and that didn't really make it any healthier. So let's move to seed oils. So this is what it is now. It'll soon be something different. But no, I'm not even remotely close to worried about seed oils. I'm not worried about omega-6 to omega-3s. I'm more worried about our habits.
Okay. Like I've said, this comes up a lot in my life, more than it should. And I can't speak for everyone, but from what you have heard from people that have shown a concern to you, let's just speak for those people. What is the big concern, number one concern of people saying, I don't want to consume seed oils because?
I would venture to say that they can't tell you what the concern is. I would venture to say they don't know. If you were to really ask them why, I would venture to say that they couldn't tell you, but they've heard it. And we have a really great friend who deals a lot with kids, and we've had this conversation with her about other really controversial topics as far as like kids and caring for kids and raising kids. And what we tend to find is that people are always going to choose the safer thing, right? In other words, they can't necessarily tell you why they shouldn't have seed oils, but I'd rather not find out what the negative impacts are, even if it is true. So even though I can't tell you whether or not it is true, it seems like it might just be safer not to, so I'm not going to. The rumor is that when you have a high consumption of seed oils, you generally have chronic inflammation. And whenever you have chronic inflammation, those things lead to all of the known chronic diseases that are the main killers in the US, like heart disease, like diabetes, like obesity, and all of the byproducts that come with that, right? So we know that there's a really strong correlation between obesity and the development of cancer. And so again, everyone is like, well, I'm going to stop eating, insert anything, and that's going to reduce my risk for everyone's trying to stay healthy. They're trying to stay healthy and they're trying to stay alive as long as they can.
But then by replacing that with beef tallow, you are possibly keeping and increasing the chance of those very things occurring.
And now you see why people say the number one problem that they have in our application is confusion. Because yes, they'll hear, well, they're making it with beef tallow, but I've always heard that, causes heart disease too. So what is it? The same thing is true of eggs, right? I mean, for years, people who are, quote, nutrition professionals said, don't eat eggs, they're going to raise your cholesterol. And the next year it would be eat eggs, they're fine for you. And then don't eat eggs because there's the cholesterol. And then it's butter's bad. No, butter's good. No, there's all of these different things. And so it's no wonder people are confused. But yes, you're right. Now all of a sudden we take the message of, we don't use seed oils, we use beef tallow, and people automatically say, well, seed oils are bad. They know that. They've substituted for something different. This must be good. And we tend to struggle with, if anything, we tend to struggle with moderation, right? We tend to struggle with the middle grounds. Things are either all good or they're all bad. There's nothing in the middle there that's like, yeah, this isn't necessarily good, but, once a month's probably not gonna be too bad. But boy, I'm busy, and so I'm gonna choose the place with beef tallow more often than not. And now it's like, okay, well, you're swapping one for one. You're not in any better of a situation now than you were when you weren't in a bad situation when you were eating seed oils, but you're not in a better one now because you're eating stuff that's fried in beef tallow as opposed to seed oil.
If you had to guess what the next demon food or whatever it is that people call it is gonna be, like, could you have seen these ones coming? All the stuff that is currently being, it's demonized, right? We're like, what could be a guess that the next one is gonna be?
Man, that's good. I mean, I think the one that really just sort of made me think like, I can't believe we're here, is when people started demonizing fruits and vegetables as killing us. But nonetheless, that's where we're at. If I had to guess what the next thing's gonna be, oh man, they've already attacked dairy. Dairy's been, we got a whole fridge full of dairy, so we might be screwed. I don't know. I mean, at some point, it's got to be full circle. Let's start circling back to something else. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. If you've got any questions, you can always send those to us at info@v2pnutrition.com. We would be more than happy to cover questions that you've got. In fact, that's the only thing we're really interested in covering. So have a great week, everybody. We will be back again here in a couple of weeks with another new episode.